All right, pushing back against reports of drunkenness on the job, claims of sexual assault. Pete Hegseth, you see there, was in the hot seat as senators wasted no time pinning down the embattled nominee for Secretary of Defense. You have been watching our live coverage of the first confirmation hearing of several that will take place this week as President-elect Trump hopes that his top cabinet picks will be confirmed. Chief Global Affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz was paying close attention along with our Jay O'Brien. They are both up on Capitol Hill. Also joining us, retired Army Colonel Ellen Herring, who is now a senior fellow at Women in International Security, where she directs the Combat Integration Initiative. Martha, let's start with you. Senators came in hot, challenging Hegseth on his character, the allegations of sexual assault, and numerous times about his stance on women in the military. Do you think he answered the questions directly enough?
Well, let's be clear, Kira. Democratic senators came in hot and had some very, very pointed questions for him. This was a highly political hearing, one of the most political hearings I've ever heard of for a defense secretary nominee. And Pete Hegseth went out of his way to praise the incoming commander-in-chief. He was asked several times what he would do under a Donald Trump, whether he would stand up to him. And Pete Hegseth basically just returned to saying the Pentagon needs to be changed, and under Donald Trump there would be a big change, and they would go back to lethality. He talked a lot about this warrior ethos and was challenged about that by many Democratic senators as well. And on many questions, and certainly those personal questions about events in Monterey, which were investigated by local police, and those charges by a woman unidentified who said he sexually assaulted her, he strongly denied any wrongdoing, saying that was false. But anything that those Democratic senators would put forward, he would basically say it was an anonymous smear. They went down a list of things. Did you do this? Did you do that? Were you drunk here? Were you drunk there? Infidelity. And he just kept saying anonymous smear, although he had said at the beginning he is not a perfect human being. And Senator Tim Kaine had asked him those questions directly, one after another. And Senator Kaine also said that the committee had actual names of some of those people he kept saying were anonymous. Kira?
So Senator Jeanne Shaheen reminding Hegseth about his own words, calling women in the military incompetent and that they make our military less effective. Let's take a listen.
After your nomination, you did state to a group of reporters that you, quote, support all women serving in our military today who do a fantastic job across the globe, including combat. So what I'm confused about, Mr. Hegseth, is which is it? Why should women in our military, if you were the Secretary of Defense, believe that they would have a fair shot and an equal opportunity to rise through the ranks? If on the one hand, you say that women are not competent, they make our military less effective, and on the other hand, you say, oh no, now that I've been nominated to be the Secretary of Defense, I've changed my view on women in the military. What do you have to say to the almost 400,000 women who are serving today about your position on whether they should be capable to rise through the highest ranks of our military?
Senator, I would say I would be honored to have the opportunity to serve alongside you, shoulder to shoulder, men and women, black, white, all backgrounds, with a shared purpose. Our differences are not what define us. Our unity and our shared purpose is what define us, and you will be treated fairly and with dignity, honor, and respect, just like every man and woman in uniform, just like the men and women that I've worked with in my veterans organizations, to include when I was a headquarters and headquarters company commander in the Minnesota National Guard.
Well, I appreciate your 11th hour conversion.
Ellen, as a retired Army colonel, do you believe him? Does Pete Hegseth deserve to be Secretary of Defense in your eyes?
No, you know, if you read his book, and specifically an entire chapter that he dedicates to bashing service women, I don't believe him for a second. I mean, he has long and well-founded view, not well-founded, but long and well-established views on this topic. I don't believe him. I don't believe this 11th hour switch at all. And I'll tell you that service women who are currently serving in dangerous jobs in these ground combat units feel like they have been sucker punched. It was under the Trump's first administration that these women began to be integrated into these ground combat units. So it's peculiar to me and to all of us that he would now select a Secretary of Defense who goes against what his first administration actually successfully did.
Martha, your thoughts?
Well, I think Pete Hegseth tried to say he had really not just changed his mind, but that the things he said before were just as a Fox host and an author. But I've not only read that book about the warriors, I've listened to the book, and he says it very powerfully that women are a distraction, in effect implying that people could die because of the distraction of women in combat. He did say after he was nominated that he appreciated women in the military. They make the military stronger. But his views on women in combat, he talks a lot about like lifting heavy objects. I don't think a man or woman would be allowed in a position where they couldn't lift or do the job they are supposed to do in the military. It is merit-based in the military. They have not, according to the Pentagon, lowered any of those standards. I covered this from the very beginning when women first were given combat roles. And remember, combat roles help with advancement in the military. It's why you have yet to see probably a female chairman of the Joint Chiefs, because they never had that experience for many years before to work their way up to that level. They certainly have now through those opportunities. Yes, some women did not make it in those areas, and some men did not make it as well. But the Pentagon says very strongly that these are merit-based positions now, and that you must meet a standard. Kira.
Jay, we heard a lot of questions about women in the military, about being drunk on the job, allegations of sexual assault. But did we learn enough about how Pete Hegseth would actually lead the Pentagon?
Well, that was what Republicans tried to steer some of the questioning to, Kira, talking about an audit that Pete Hegseth has supported being conducted in the Pentagon, his various positions on conflicts overseas and U.S. military posture, and as Martha noted, the general tone and tenor of how the military should take. But when you look at the theme of this hearing, it could really be separated into certain parts. One are those concerns that Democrats said about Pete Hegseth's background. Pete Hegseth's argument to that is, A, he called it, as Martha noted, a smear campaign, and also B, he said he's a changed man. That's something that I can tell you in my conversations with senators. Pete Hegseth has been saying behind closed doors with Republican senators as well. And with a number of senators I talked to, that argument is somewhat working with potentially at some point skeptical Republican senators. And then there are those concerns of Democrats that Pete Hegseth doesn't have the requisite experience to run the Department of Defense. And Pete Hegseth tried to say that that was a positive in his column in this hearing, saying that because of that, he's an outsider. Democrats tried to pick holes into that, asking Pete Hegseth, had he ever negotiated with American allies? Did he know various, aspects of American foreign policy and DOD policy, to which Pete Hegseth offered some answers, not the full answers that Democrats were looking for. But they didn't necessarily chip away at that argument full scale to the degree that we've seen it might flip any Republicans. If you want a bellwether here, really, Kira, look at Joni Ernst, who's a female combat veteran, who's a survivor of sexual assault, who's someone that a number of Republican senators had been looking to while they were making up their minds on Pete Hegseth. And Joni Ernst, A, asked Pete Hegseth largely friendly questions, and B, she introduced statements into the record that were supportive of Pete Hegseth's work with veterans organizations that, by the by, Democrats labeled accusations of financial mismanagement and other misconduct during Pete Hegseth's tenure there. Hegseth denies all of that. But point being is, Joni Ernst didn't have an openly confrontational moment with Pete Hegseth in this hearing, and a number of Republicans looking to her. So no outright opposition at this hour to Pete Hegseth's nomination.
Martha Raddatz, Jay O'Brien, Colonel Ellen Herring, thank you both, or all three of you, very much.